Hello, hello, and welcome to episode 94 of the Titanforge podcast. I'm Dratnos, joined by Tettles.
Yo, what's up? Congratulations on getting the number of the episode correct.
Dude, don't call attention to it, it's not cool if you do. And Trell.
What up? What up? Congrats.
Yo. Yo.
Is that a hot tub background we have this week?
Yes, it is. It is indeed. It's the Tomb of Sargeras, up at the top bit. I'm glad you asked though, as it was you that sent it to us and told us to put it as the background for this week.
Trell casually bringing up the fact that he said earlier yesterday, "Hey, make this our background."
So that's where we're hanging out this week, up in the up by Tomb of Sargeras, where Tettles was telling me earlier. That's where he AFK'd while waiting for keys. I definitely AFK'd up here when I was on the bench on Fallen Avatar. That was where I was hanging out.
Oh yeah, I remember some tweets.
Oh,
outside
you were
too.
playing.
Sorry, Gary.
You were playing Warrior that
I was a
tier.
DPS warrior, yeah.
Yeah. I was like, how the fuck did a rogue get benched on Fallen? I'm just sitting here. I was like, how the fuck did a rogue get benched that tier? I was like, rogue is so disgusting. Oh, never mind. He's a warrior.
That
That's
was
right.
the tier. Yeah, I switched to Rogue for farm in farm during that tier.
As
But-
you should have.
Oh yeah, it was good. It was fun. It was a good year or so of Rogue that started then.
Warrior was Warrior bad that tier? I don't even remember
No, it was
anymore.
fine. You had Umbral Moonglaves as well from the
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Moon boss. And
It
so
was the
yeah.
It was the best DPS spec in Mythic Plus by like a lot that tier. I
Because,
do
yeah.
remember that. Yeah, they
Yeah.
did freakish amounts of damage.
The tier set was all about the Blade Storm, so it was so good for like M plus. You'd run in like Warbreaker Avatar Blade Storm, and you're just throwing out these mortal strikes and everything. It was so cool. And you'd have
Only Rogue
Umbral
was
going
brought
as
to
well.
raid.
Yeah.
Only Rogue was brought to raid though that tier for melee.
There were like 5 rogue spots because every single boss had mechanics that you could soak or just have a rogue go and cloak in them. Fallen Avatar and KJ among those fights.
Dude, you didn't even have to cloak the fucking KJ annihilations.
Yeah, you
you
just
could feint cheat death them every single time. You're like, this is the most dumb shit I've ever seen.
Well, you'd go like feint the first, cloak the second, and then you could take the third as well. You just 3 of every 4 you could basically take on that fight. It's so good.
Has there been that good of a rogue defensive wise tier since then? I don't think so, right?
No,
No, they've made Feint work on like okay. Historically, there should be abilities that Feint works on that Feint just no longer works now because
Well-
they after that they're just like not letting it happen.
Feint usually still works. It's cloak that they've kind of gone in and all immunities. They've just made like a bunch of stuff that either pierces immunities or still does bad stuff if you do immune it.
Well, almost all ground soaks now are not feintable too. Like the big fucking circle, like the circle reticles are just like more often than not also not feintable, right? That's what
I
I-
haven't.
I think they are feintable, but
Yeah,
maybe there's 1 or 2 that aren't. I can't
Feint
remember.
Feint has gotten nerfed several times. It used to be like spammable
40.
and 50% DR, and now it's on like a cooldown and it's a 40% DR. But still good. It's still really good.
Do you remember whenever they would stand in the fucking things on Avatar in the circles, like underneath the fucking boss? Every other player on the whole entire raid has to move like back out of melee or like back across the room. Rogue plants. I'm eating all of these. Heal me.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a good tier. They really changed it up after that tier. That they were like, oh, that's too much too much immunes and stuff. But then Argus was all about immunes as well. But you had to pre-immune. You had to immune before the thing got applied to you on Argus.
Yeah.
Because if you immuned afterwards, it just exploded the chain on your whole raid.
The chains, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm so glad we're out of this immune bullshit meta. It was awful.
This week, our main topic is going to be a discussion of how to pick up a new spec. That was something we hinted at this last week. It was I think Foden kind of suggested or asked the question, and we were like, oh, this could do as a whole show here. So we've written out some different thoughts. We've got how all 3 of us do it. Although it's well known that Tettles has never had to pick up a new spec. Due to
I played Hunter.
Moonkin just being good every single tier forever. But yeah, that's our main topic this week. We also are thinking about moving the time of the show. This is kind of a realization we've had after it keeps being Saturdays that get like lobbed from our schedules for MDI or Race to World First or whatever, like all these different things. So right now the tentative plan is we're thinking about moving it to Thursdays after the next race to World First. Um, it would probably be a little bit later, probably something like 4 Pacific, so 4 hours later than now, which is a lot later, particularly for EU people. That might push it off the calendar, but the upside is that it would be a time that we could do it pretty much every week, hopefully, and not have to take these like MDI breaks and everything, and or moving things to midweek and then moving back.
Yeah.
Um, so
Well, I mean, also Thursdays are typically pretty free for us at those times because we all like have our schedule kind of blocked off for raid. So we typically aren't doing shit prior to raid, at least more often than not, we're not at least. So
Right, yeah.
we should have these days and times like more readily available.
yeah, so we're not 100% set on that yet, but that is the current plan. If that's like really negatively impacting you, particularly if you're a patron, do let us know, and we could potentially still move it around a bit. But that's the idea for now. And again, it wouldn't be until after the next race to World First, so there's a good chance that's beyond the scope of most of our lifetimes anyway at this pace.
Yeah. So I mean, that is like 1 a.m. CEST, which does suck. I mean, the reason that we initially picked like Saturday is at like noon Pacific, which is like 9 CEST, I think. I mean, so European audiences could watch it live, but at the same time, it's having to move it like 5 times a year is just also a bit wild.
Mhm. Okay.
Consistency is great though. Out of like 115 shows that we could have potentially done, we've hit like 94. So
Yeah, we were looking at
Yeah,
that
for sure.
recently. We've hit what, more than 80% of our potential weeks where we could have done the show. That's pretty good. That's higher than I ever did in school. 80%.
attendance, I don't show up.
Solid B minus.
Yeah, a solid B minus. That's what we're all about here. Okay, so we'll do that main topic, but first we have our tip of the week segment. Charles, what is your tip of the week?
Ooh, mine's very specific this week. I'm running out of tips. We need more content. Please, Blizzard. Please, I beg. Um, but I've been playing my DK a little bit, playing on Holy actually. And this goes along with our learning new specs episode, but I remembered I have a macro for DK for control undead where I have pet dismiss on the same button. So I don't have to have two different buttons for both dismissing my pet or rather than just like clicking your pet and then clicking dismiss as well. So you can just have it all in one spot. And if you press the button once, it dismisses your pet. And then if you press it again, it controls your target for DK purposes, like the Honor Guards on the Tal'Dazar last expansion or the Shield guy in Theater of Pain this expansion, you could technically control as Unholy or Blood. But that's just one quick way to save a keybind as DK.
Yeah, because you need to dismiss your pet to mind control a new one, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's good stuff. There, and there's a couple spots you can do that in Shadowlands as well, right? There's a couple of good potential MCs in like Necrotic Wake as well, I think.
The big dudes in Necrotic Wake are MCable, right? They're actually pretty good. Not
Not
the
the abominations,
Not
right?
the
not the
Stitch
A
Works.
bombs. The ones
The
that do the fervent.
okay, the like loyal creations or
Yeah, I think
That's the
Low
one.
Creation.
I think that one actually does pretty considerable damage, right?
I don't
My
know,
under,
but it might.
my understanding it does, but could be making that up.
yeah. All right, my tip of the week is you should download if you're a lot of people I know have been kind of hesitant to do this for a long time, but you're missing out at this point if you don't. You should download the Epic Game Store add-on, or not add-on, but app. They put free games on there like every week, and at this point, if you've just been getting the free games every week for the last like year, you'd have so many different games. There've been some good ones recently. There were like 3 weeks of Nitro that might still be up right now, or 3 months of Discord Nitro you could get if you've never had Nitro before out of it as well. So it's a lot of people I know have been like Steam partisans. They love Steam,
Yes.
but it is worth picking this thing up and just picking up the free games at least on that store.
What a fucking sick tip of the week.
Look, man, it's not my
Maybe,
fault that Blizzard hasn't given us any content in 7 years, man.
yeah, maybe next week
I
I'll talk about
respect it.
credit score.
Yeah. Dude, I would not be opposed to a credit score tip of the week. I think that would be great.
Dude,
Okay.
okay, this is completely off topic, but during some of those method race to world first to 24-hour ones, they always gave me the worst shifts at like 4 a.m. and I would sit there and talk about credit score. So completely unrelated though.
All right, let's take a look at Tettles' clip of the week. Do we need sound for this one?
No,
Okay.
okay. The only reason I picked this is because Dretnos, tell us about Raid Masters.
Oh yeah, dude. This was a event that I was casting. Actually, the finals are coming up next weekend. The 20th is when the finals for this were, and this is raid speedrunning. This is a clip of XD securing their sire Denathria's kill, which set them at a 1 hour 15-minute Castle Nathria full clear, which at the
So swear.
time, and I think still is the world record actually for speed
pretty
clearing
solid.
this raid. Yeah, I mean they one shot all the way through. They were zooming. It was incredible. Um,
It usually takes my guild a good hour and 15 minutes just to kill Stone Legion generals, to be honest.
yeah, that happens to other guilds competing in this thing as well. I mean, the fact that these guys just went through and one shot everything actually was pretty special. Not a lot of guilds were able to do that from the ones we were watching. But yeah, if you want to watch on the 20th, there's a bunch of guilds. I don't know if Vodka is qualified through. I didn't. They hadn't done their runs yet when I checked. But here there's XD. Their world top 50. Pieces is going to be in there. They just got to buy straight to the finals by virtue of being so high ranked on the leaderboard. So no idea how fast they are yet. But a bunch of world, I would say 0 to 100, and then also even like 100 to 300. There's guilds representing there. So um, it's gonna
And
be cool.
questions in the chat. It's Mythic, right?
Yes, Mythic Castle Nathria speed run, speed clear. Which yeah, I mean it means that like just one shotting the bosses itself is difficult, but beyond that, there's like speed strats on SLG. Like on SLG, you can take the two
Yeah.
gargoyles from phase one into the intermission, and then when they die, they each drop 3 of your 10 anima orbs, and so you can just kill 3 Goliaths and 1 Commando in each intermission, and that's all you got to do to get out of
Ha
it.
have you guys actually done that before? I've
You know,
we've done
we
that
did
in our
that.
guild.
Yeah, so well, we actually did it on accident 2 weeks ago. Someone lusted on pull, like, a mage hears the word lust and they just press it. And then so we just went with it and hit the boss to phase him faster. And it ended up being a really good strat. And we killed the boss with 9 free anima in the first intermission, and it ended up being really good for my Windwalker cooldown. So I was a big fan. But my guild wouldn't do it the next week for some reason.
That should have been my tip of the week. Never say "don't lust" because Mage Brain is only attuned to the word lust. So if you say that word, they have no choice but to press it. But yeah, it was cool. It's a cool thing to watch, and I actually kind of I while watching it, I was kind of wishing I was playing in it. Had that kind of vibe. I was like, man, I this looks fun.
Dude,
Yeah.
I sat there and I thought about that too, and I was like, this would have been interesting, and I think my guild would have done okay in it. But it's so disproportionate, like the amount of work that you have to do to set up something like that is so lopsided on your like raid leader.
Well,
I was like, damn, that's a lot of fucking work, man.
most of these guilds, it's not like they did practice runs or anything. And in fact, the clip we were watching there of XD, this is a split run for them. Like this is not even all
Really?
wins, right? Yeah, this is one of their two splits for this week. So, I mean, they're coming in, and a lot of guilds are coming in just kind of like, what's our take on this, rather than like let's practice something a lot, because you couldn't really practice, right? It's mythic lockouts. I mean, you could have practiced last week, I guess, or the week before, but most of these guilds didn't, including the guilds that did really well. So I don't know. I think it's kind of cool though. Classic is all about speed clearing raids, right? That's the competitive form of classic. But there's something cool about it in retail as well. Particularly this late into a tier, it's a way to make the raid somewhat exciting again.
I thought it was really cool to watch. A lot of people in my guild were watching live, and we were thinking of doing it next year when it's not like a Stone Legion general tier.
Yeah, SLG being there is
Hopefully.
definitely like one of the guilds we watched. It was just brickwalled by SLG for like an hour, and it's like, man, I do not want to be that there. Like I could see how so easily that could happen if I was doing this, right? Like
Every guild.
every guild can just run into SLG prison.
That boss is just like so trapped because one or two deaths and you're just the fight is over too. And there's just so much garbage that's going on if you push at the wrong time. Or you for some reason miss a commando shield. There's a bunch of shit that can go wrong too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one commando moves like 10 feet out of the stack, and it's like, oh, there goes
Yep.
50% of the damage on it.
Yep.
It feels like every other week we have a commando shield like randomly go off, and we're at the point where we just live now. We're like, thank fucking God.
Let's go.
Damn, that's awesome.
Yeah, you can if you're topped. It's just, it's what is happening here? Okay, let's move on to our main topic. We have how to pick up a new spec, which is, I think, a pretty frequently experienced, problem or question, even if it's not that talked about. I think this is something that, at least I run into this multiple times per patch usually.
Same.
So it's, I think, a cool thing to talk about. So let's talk about just how to get started. I think the most common thing that people will tell you is like go read a guide, right? So there are a bunch of different places you can go and find guides for your class. I would say Wowhead is one that probably has the highest floor across all of its guides, but they're varying quality, even the Wowhead spec ones, right? Some of them are better than others. I would say particularly one of the hardest parts about playing a new spec is you don't actually know whether the guide is good until you've played it a while, right? And then you know whether they're making stuff up or not.
That's what I was going to say. I was about to say, I think guides are good, but I usually wait until after I played the spec for a couple weeks before I actually compare my knowledge to the guide, just to like get a double check on my own process.
I do think that like also joining class discords can be helpful. Class discords are also varying levels of quality. Some of them are like really good. Some of them are, they could use some work.
Yeah,
Um,
you can join and check the pins, see if there's any useful pinned knowledge. Definitely before you ask any questions, make sure they're not answered in the pins, or else you're gonna get a lot of angry class Discord people. Oh, check the pins.
oh, dude, those people are so cringe
How
sometimes.
dare you ask this incredibly specific knowledge question that there's no way you would
Well,
know the answer to?
I empathize with both sides, man, because they're just sitting there talking about their class, and 10 times a day somebody comes in and asks the same question.
It really
Um,
depends on the question. If it's like nuanced, I kind of get it. Like I get wanting you to ask first and check the pin second. If it's like a really, really basic question, you're just like, all right, come on. You don't gotta be like that, man.
I would say a really useful thing to do is, if there is somebody good at the class, they can usually recommend which guides are good also. So
Mhm.
rather than you having to figure out how the class works and then figure out which guides have the right stuff, if there's somebody you trust that is to be good at the class and good at the spec, getting them to recommend you a guide is potentially a really good way to not have to be doing that kind of verifying as much at the start.
How do you feel about watching streamers versus like reading a guide?
I think that both can be good. Um,
Yeah.
it's rare. Like usually you're playing a spec in either M plus or raid, so there's a lot of different combinations of that, right? There's 72 different combinations of spec and either M plus or raid. How
Mhm.
many good streamers there are for each of those, for all those 72 different possibilities? There's probably not always going to be somebody live of the one you want, right? Particularly if it's like a less popular spec. But I think, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, good.
there have been times where I've learned a spec and I'm like, oh, I really wish I could find this survival hunter POV for someone that's doing Mythic Plus, but there's like no one streaming at the time. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll find the most relevant AoE log and raid and then compare how they do that and then apply that to Mythic Plus.
Yeah, you can also check VODs sometimes. VODs can be, you can't ask questions in a VOD, but you can watch a VOD and see what people do. So that can be helpful too. I would say that like video guide, stream, written guide, different people just learn differently, have different like learning styles, and so which of those is going to work best for you, and also which of them have good resources available for your spec. There's no, always right answer there. You can also go hit a training dummy. That's something that I do for quite a while when I'm picking up a new, particularly DPS spec. Just go hit a
Yeah.
training dummy for a while. It's
I,
not perfect, but it can be useful.
I think
I
that
do
it
the same
kind
thing.
of I think it really depends. I do also hit a training dummy, but there's like a couple of different things that I will end up doing. It's like either I'll convince my guild to play with my shitty alt in dungeons, which I think is like your best case scenario. I think actually coaxing your friend group to bring your trap character
to like dungeons is the best way that you're going to be able to like learn on the fly because there's so many different damage profiles and there's so much different stuff going on. You also like learn a lot of your utility abilities. That's the best case scenario. Secondarily, I would say like go hit a patchwork. Like I would queue up for Sludge Fist or Shriekwing or some patchwork boss and just do that like a few times. Like you don't even need like specifically for the loot, just queuing up to try to learn the how your like rotation functions and how the class really plays inside of raid. That can be helpful, and doing it on patchwork bosses is normally like not that difficult because you're not worried about things going on. But then if all else fails and you don't really have time for that, hitting a training dummy is also pretty good.
Yeah, I usually, when I'm playing something new, I kind of have an idea about whether I'm wanting to do it for Mythic Plus or for Raid. And for a lot of specs, the build is quite different between the two. Like, there's different talent choices
Yeah.
and different stuff that you want to do. Not for your stupid Moonkin or whatever, necessarily, but to me, that, like, I would rather do the Pug or LFR raid bosses or do the dungeons based on whether that's the like thing I'm doing the alt for. That's the or what I'm starting with on my alt because I like to start with just one thing that I'm trying to get good
Yeah.
at and not be like trying to do all the things on a new class that I'm unfamiliar
Wh-
with.
When I played Hunter in Raid with Mythic Plus talents for literally forever. It's not that it was like that big of a difference between for BM specifically, but I literally just played it with Mythic Plus talents every single week.
I mean, that's fine. It wasn't that big of a difference back then, but yeah, that's a good example of like the little split off of pure AOE or consistent cleave versus single target.
Yeah, because in my experience, even the AOE fights in Raid, there's usually pretty different stuff between that and like the M plus build. But it depends. It depends on the thing. You can go and find out, and we will show some resources of that. Never do ask a relevant question here, which is how do you unlearn old rotations if you're going back to a spec you played in a previous expansion? So
Ooh.
I think this is a good question because some like at this point a lot of us have played all the specs at some point or a lot of them, and you come back and it's like two expansions ago. You last time you played Demonology Lock it had meta or whatever. And it's like what how do I unlearn these muscle memories? Particularly if you're somebody who's switching between playing a spec in classic and playing it on retail as well. How do you avoid developing there's a warlock in my guild that kept trying to life tap during our retail raid.
Nice, yeah. So I've run into this a couple times where I have like muscle memory and I got to break it. So I think the easiest way for me to do it personally is to change my keybinds. I have to think about what keys I'm pressing that way, and I have to actively like put together the new rotation instead of the old one in my brain. So it just forces me to like completely rewire it. And also hitting a training dummy for a while you do that, it's a good idea.
I think that's a good one, yeah. It's hard though. I mean, it's hard to overwrite rather than start from new.
Dude,
Yeah.
trying to play them in tandem sometimes too. Like whenever like a beta of a new expansion will be coming out and you'll be like playing a decent amount of the beta and you'll like log on to your raid log retail raid and you're just like, "Oh fuck, I've just completely ruined my rotation. What have I done?"
Yeah. Muscle memory is so powerful. It's actually the psychology of it's great. It usually takes like a good 20 minutes to like warm up to something you're trying to do if you were just doing something similar but pretty different.
I think another thing that's important when you're picking up your alt is figuring out how serious you are trying to play it. So I've done this both times. Like sometimes I'm playing a new alt where it's like I am getting this alt ready because I am raiding on this thing soon, right? And so it's like I am not cutting any corners. I'm gonna learn all the right stuff. I'm gonna do it the right way. I'm gonna become an expert on this character, right? Whereas on some of my alts, it's like I'm having some funsies. I'm gonna do some Mythic Plus on this character because that looks like it's gonna be fun, and maybe I'll use this for something in the future. But this is a for fun character, and there it's a lot less like about that, and I it's a lot less about making sure that you have everything perfect in that same way.
I mean, for me, it's more or less just like how much time am I going to put into this? Like, how much time do I need to put into this to get like at what level is expected out of this character? If I have to play it during like raid prog, like I'm going to be slamming that character for multiple weeks in advance, doing dungeons or like raid or whatever, and just really trying to make sure that I am adequately prepared and comfortable with every situation that can present itself. Because the worst possible thing is playing a spec that you're not familiar with a fight that is also just like very uncomfortable at the same time. You're
Oh
like,
yeah.
what the fuck am I supposed to do here? I'm gonna die. It's like Il'gynoth, my first time playing that on Hunter, I was just like fucking running it down. I'm like, okay, dude, I'm just dying to every single thing. This is cursed. And it's just like you need to make sure that if you were playing it at a very competitive level, you need to be very thorough with what you're doing and make sure that you were comfortable with not only just the rotation, but also the stuff outside of it as well.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's good.
that's like the hardest scenario on a new spec. I think the ways to prevent that are the best things to learn going into a raid group, especially if you're trialing somewhere on a new spec or something. You gotta like try to think of every possible scenario, like Tuttle said, that could happen to you on this boss, and then have a plan for it beforehand, so you don't have to think about it in the moment and then ruin your rotation or ruin your positioning or something. But it's hard to think of all those things. Like the best way is to watch people doing the boss themselves on the same spec, or find some random thing in logs like, oh, they cast Bop here for some reason at 520 in the fight. I wonder why, and then that could give you some insight. But yeah, those situations are tough.
I think people usually trap themselves as well if they're trying to trial on some off spec or alt or whatever. Like you hear people about this sometimes where it's like, yeah, I have a main spec tank, but this guild has a spot for me if I come and DPS for them or whatever. So I'm gonna go and just pick up this new spec. I think you even did this, right, Chell? You like went and moonwalked and like
Dread is throwing shade.
Well, I think it's a
Dude,
trap
it was
for
so
most
tough.
people to do it though. I think that like if you're good, you can make it work. You can earn that spot, and you can. But like, if you're somebody who's like you would have, hung on and been okay on your main spec, you come in and you're on some off spec, and it's just like you're out of there, right? People are gonna think you're awful.
Dude, there are some people who are just fucking wild at being able to multi-class. Like we have some, everybody has some people in their guild, and it's just like, yeah, I'll play this, and then you see them show up to raid on just like some random character, and they're just like beating all of your mains. And you're just like, what the fuck? Didn't you just level that character like 3 weeks ago? What the hell? How is this happening?
Yeah, that's a great point. Is some people just take longer to get good at a new spec than others, and it's nothing to be ashamed of. If you're more on the like WoW is not a game where you can't be good if you can't pick up stuff fast. It just means don't try and pick up stuff fast if that's not you, right? Like don't put yourself in a situation where you need to play it in the next 2 weeks.
And hopefully this episode helps anyone that it takes a long time to pick up a new spec on, because all three of us have done it quite a bit in the past, and we have a lot of random knowledge. A lot of it's going to be similar, but we all have our own processes, so it's going to be fun to compare.
Yeah, let's get started diving into that. Trell, why don't you start with your like rough process of if you need a new spec that you're gonna play, what sort of things do you do?
So like I'm going back to the very beginning of learning a spec. Like let's say I just picked up my DK because I did recently, and it's level 50 in Shadowlands. So I put Netflix on one monitor and I put WoW on the other, and I just start leveling with Azeroth autopilot. And I just put abilities on my keybinds as I go. I already had a lot of keybinds set from BFA. I played it a little bit Unholy and BFA, but I'll put any new abilities because Shadowlands has tons of new abilities for every spec. And I'll just roughly hit the mobs, not like do anything crazy. I'm not studying anything yet. And then I'll just see what does damage, what gives you cooldown reduction, what gives you resources, what spends resources, what works best together and all that. So I'll do that while I level up. Once I hit max level, I'll look at the best single target log from the raid, the current raid. So in this case, it was like Hungering Devourer. Sludgefist is a really good single target boss, but it's really unique in that people's openers are going to be different than they would normally be because they have to save a lot of cooldowns for the pillars. So I chose Hungering Devourer this time. And so I looked at like the top Unholy logs and then got my single target rotation down like we were talking about earlier. I would just go hit a dummy for a little bit and figure it out. And then after I got the single target stuff, I would move on to AoE. So for that, I looked at Stone Legion because that's the biggest like AoE burst fight where most specs need to do something to the skirmishers or the commandos. And I would see like what DK players are doing there and how they set up their AoE burst. There's usually like a lot of build up for specs, unless it's like Mage. Well, I mean, actually, Mage has a lot of build up. There's some specs where you just like press AoE, and you just go. But usually there's some setup. So once you have your single target and AoE down, then you can kind of combine and figure out the playstyles in between and do some keys, do some rage, do some LFR, get some practice in. And then once you're really comfortable, then I would fix all your keybinds to be in the better places. So like I would put all my CDs that I generally use together next to each other on shift 2 and 3 in my case. I would set up my UI better, so I'd see my weak auras in the right places. Like at this point, I know on Unholy I need to look at the uptime on like Runic Corruption, for example, or Abomination Limb, or the ability that turns your ghoul into a bigger ghoul that I can't remember
Dark
right
Transformation.
Yeah,
Dark Transformation.
I
So, but yeah, the point is like once you have a good amount of knowledge on a class, you want to rearrange your UI to make yourself better at it and to be able to track your stuff in any given situation.
I have a question. So, not to derail you, but do you download just like Weakora packs off of Wago that contain like all of the icons, or do you make them as you go yourself?
I've always been an advocate for making them as I go myself. I think the Weakora packs can be really good, and they have some great advantages over my way of doing it. But I've never been a fan of just like plastering something on my screen and then getting used to it. If that makes sense.
Normally I just throw some shit on my screen and I'll just figure it out later, and then like I edit it if I need to. But it's interesting that because the way you were talking, I was like, wait, does he make all of his own shit? I'm surprised that you make all of your own stuff. I feel like I would be at a like in the beginning. I feel like I would be super lost if I didn't just have like all the weak auras like shown on my screen at least in some element, because there's typically a reason that they're there. Hopefully.
And I think that's a great point. I think maybe downloading that at first for me would even be a good thing for my process, just so I can see what people designed at the beginning and then figuring out why as I went, and then maybe deleting it later.
Yeah.
But I like a very minimalist UI, at least for the middle of my screen. I don't like having a bunch of weak auras right under my character.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah, there's I use the Afinar ones for basically all specs as like a starting point, but there's definitely downsides associated with that as well. There's certain like they always try and make it so that it fits the whole square, so there's often like extra weak auras that you might not actually need on there. And sometimes there's things that are just not displayed in an optimal way. For instance, on Demon Hunter, it'll show you your meta cooldown, but if you're in meta, it will show you your meta duration on the same spot. And so if you're in meta and you want to know the cooldown of meta, right? Say you get a meta proc from Demonic or whatever, you can't look at it on that weak aura until your meta expires. So I would say, regardless of whether you want to build it up yourself or take a weak aura pack, you need to be able to solve those problems and edit and modify the weak aura pack so that it shows you whatever information you actually need to see.
That's
a good
actually
point.
that's so bad for that meta cooldown thing, by the way. I
Yeah.
didn't even realize that they do that, because
Yeah,
whenever you pop Feldev, you're in meta, but your CD is still rolling, and so like there's some. You definitely still need to know your cooldown of meta, because like what if you're going Feldev into meta, like, or you need to know that there's a 3-second overlap of where you're gonna not be mitigating like damage before you're able to pop meta, but you're not really able to see that because you popped Feldev, and
Yeah,
now you're
so
stuck in that metamorphosis form.
identifying where your UI has those weaknesses can actually be pretty hard as well. I think for a lot of players, that's the sort of those sorts of things you would just like be playing worse and not really know why. So do take a little bit of time and look at your UI and be like, is there something that this is obscuring the way that I'm doing it right now? And remember, the worst case of like having all your buttons on the bottom of your screen is also has some problems, right? Like there, your eyes are going to be looking down at the bottom of your screen and then looking back up at the middle, and that's going to cause you to have problems also. You're going to die because while you're looking down at the bottom of your screen, there's a mob doing a frontal. So do move stuff to the middle of your screen. We've talked about this in one of our UI episodes before, but you got to be careful. You got to make sure that it's not displaying too much and also not displaying too little information for you there.
Yeah, exactly. It's about finding that balance. And also it just gives you a headache, like moving your eyes up and down constantly all the time. That's like really straining on your eyes. You got to think about your physical health to make yourself the best esports gamer as possible.
Digital athletics, yeah, that's what we're all here for.
That's why Troll bought a standing desk.
True.
And a nice shipment of gamer gummies as well to keep them in tip-top shape.
Exactly. You got to get those vitamins in, Trell.
Okay. Do you want to keep going with your process?
I mean, I was just about done. Like once you figure out all the general rotational things, and you got good binds, you got a set of weak auras, whichever way you want it. From then on, it's just about practice and just like fine tuning the little things. Like as a DPS spec, for example, you want to figure out how to do efficient 2-target cleave. That's usually something in between single target and 4 to 5 targets. That's a little bit different for a lot of specs, just based on like how the targets are moving, if they're always stacked, if they're a little bit spread. You want to know what to do in those situations. As a tank, you want to figure out how you could possibly live the longest if your healer dies. That's always something I try to figure out on the tank spec, because that situation happens a lot. And then from then on, it's like you want to have the mindset that you can't ever stop learning. I think a lot of people that have played this game for 15 years have this problem where they think they figure out a spec and then they just sit on that knowledge and call it done for years. But specs change all the time, as you see in Blizzard. They change every single spec, every X pack for some reason, and so you got to be really open minded and willing to keep improving.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think that mindset as well. WoW is in many ways a game about like knowledge rather than that, and it's less true in retail than actually it is in classic, but it's still true in retail where like just knowing all the right stuff is really important, and making sure that your mind is open to it.
Well,
Is big.
I think also too expectations from not only yourself but like the people who are around you for like what your character should be doing and like what is expected of your character. Like having those correct expectations is also super important, because like if your guild expects you to be playing at a certain level, but you expect yourself to be playing at a different level, like those can clash too, and like start to cause friction in other ways that you probably weren't ready for. So you just need to make sure that, at least if you are re-rolling for guild purposes specifically, I mean, that's if you're just picking up an alt for you, like do whatever the fuck you want, like learn at your own pace, right? But if you're picking up an alt for somebody else, making sure that the expectations for both parties is in line is important.
All right, I will now go through my process. As there's a lot of similarities to what Charles does, but there's some stuff that I do differently. For instance, when I'm at the start, usually I will spend more time at the start trying to get 90% of the way there with my keybinds and with my UI, rather than doing that after having played it with scuffed keybinds and scuffed UI for a while. I don't think there's an inherent better way between those two, but for me, that's what I like doing, is spending an hour or two, just looking through the spell book and coming up with where I think everything makes the most sense on my bars, making sure that I like to make it so that I have similar keybinds in similar places for different specs. So I'll usually put sprints on the same kind of buttons, and AoE buttons on the same kind of things. But that doesn't always work out, and sometimes that can trap you as well. What you really want to make sure you avoid doing, and what I'm always hyper vigilant on when I'm on a new spec, is when you're putting yourself in a position to finger global yourself, where you got to make sure that your rotation doesn't normally having you shift between using a modifier button and like spamming two different buttons, and that'll cause you to get like you ever play a spec where it's just like for some reason your cooldown on shift 3 always keeps getting hit at weird times, and it's because you're hitting 3 normally and then like shift F, and so a shift 3 input keeps getting sent. So make sure that your rotation doesn't have those weird like things that are going to press a weird button. Make sure that it doesn't have your pinky finger traveling 3 keys within the same global to hit this, because it's doing 2 keys in a row. Those sorts of things are stuff that you got to watch out for and change soon, early in the process, in my experience.
How do you feel about push to talk binds?
I always just have my push to talk is just always caps lock, so my pinky's just always on caps lock, and that's what I do. But I have extra binds because I have an MMO mouse, so I don't need all of them on my left hand on the keyboard.
Yeah, that push talk question's a big one. Like, I have a push talk button on my mouse that I use on one of my MMO mouse buttons, and I think it works in every game I've ever played, except some games where I have to use voice activation because I'm using a controller. So far I'm sticking with that, but if I ever have to change it, I'll have to like go through another existential crisis on what universal push to talk button I want to use.
Well, the reason I even asked that is because Drat and I were talking about this like the other day. I was like, yeah, I used to have push talk on control. And then I decided that was the most trap shit of all time. And now
I never press control during WoW. I don't have it bound as a modifier to anything. It is that is too far for my hand to travel.
Well, the biggest issue for me is just like holding it while trying to do my rotation was just not happening that well. And so then I just moved to push to mute, and I have push to mute like bound to my mouse as well. So
all right, so one thing that I'll usually do one resource that I'll use is sub creation for a new spec that I'm about to play. This is a really cool site. So there's either mplus.subcreation.net or castle-nathria.subcreation.net. I don't know what the one will be next here. But so say I was playing a new character and I was going to play it like, I was going to play feral druid on, artificer, right? So you go to this site, and you could go to artificer, and then you could go and click through the feral druid icon, and it'll show you on that fight. From the logs, it looks like the talents aren't actually all rendering here. That's probably nobody's probably checked in on the old feral page for a while, or maybe just actually the Wowhead thing is down. But usually it'll display all the talents in this spot here, and the different legendaries and stuff. But as you can see right now, only the soulbind
Lucky.
icons are loading. So maybe it's not working for feral. That's okay. Let's see if Frost is working. No, okay. It looks like just the talent icons for some reason aren't loading right now. So Sag. But normally that works, and you can then click through to see those logs themselves, and see what people are up to on them.
I have a suspicion of the answer, but Alcaros makes this website as well, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah. And so yeah, it has the M plus side of things as well. So if you wanted to play like Outlaw and M plus, you click through, and again, normally all the talent icons are here. Maybe like an ad blocker actually is screwing with it for me. Let me see if I have any ad blockers.
Oh no,
turned on,
it's
maybe.
it's Wowhead. Wowhead's
Okay.
like tooltip link is off, so I think it pulls from there, and I couldn't view tooltips on Wowhead yesterday either.
Interesting.
Is
So
Wowhead maybe going over server maintenance? Dude, basically, this is some weird shit, but like almost all websites pull from the Wowhead like icon database for most of their stuff, like tooltips and all their other shit's powered by like the Wowhead database. Most people don't know that though, but interesting fact.
Wowhead is like the center of WoW. Like they put out more patch notes than the Blizzard does. Basically, they're an unpaid source of patch notes.
I don't know if I'd describe them as unpaid. They're just unpaid by Blizzard.
yeah,
Well, true.
they certainly do. It's not like it's a charity project, but it is definitely.
A lot of fucking work.
Yeah, here's a relevant from Magic the Gathering. There's a similar site that provides a lot of the thing. Here's a tweet from on the Magic the Gathering side of things, where it's like all the Magic the Gathering content, and then they're holding it all up is one website that's like providing a bunch of useful stuff. And similarly, I think Wowhead is in a similar spot
Yeah.
for WoW content, where like every website has Wowhead tooltips or WoW is using Wowhead links for something or other. Yeah, mood.
Those guys own.
Yeah. But yeah, this site is a really useful one to go and check to see what talent builds, what legendaries, all that kind of stuff people are using. Checking the top logs like Trell did. Last week we went over a little bit what it actually looks like, but we should do it in this episode, I think, as well, to like look at an opener on Warcraft logs. You could do it in another language as well, so you just translate. So like say we wanted this top unholy log from what is this, SLG, and we wanted to see the opener going on here and the different cooldowns being used. You just click through on this person, click casts and timelines, and then you just get like a very easy to look at list of abilities. Usually the first ability, if it's before the pull, like you won't see pre-pots and stuff if people are pre-potting still.
Yeah.
You won't see pre-casts, but everything after combat starts you'll see, and you'll be able to see just all of the different abilities being used. And this can be a really useful way to kind of figure out what's going on. You can look here for cooldowns as well, although this isn't the easiest way to find out, like, if you want to find out where somebody's casting Dark Transformation, usually the easier way is to go up to here and instead click Dark Transformation here and just look at where all those casts are for cooldowns. But for like general rotation stuff, this is a great way to look at it.
Would you? Okay, so normally I don't do this, but do you normally look at people who have rank 1 on a fight? Because normally my answer is no. Normally I will look at like very specific players that I know are good and are probably not going to be trolling, and I'm just like comparing them, what they're doing to what I'm doing. Because if I look at rank 1, sometimes, especially like deep in a farm, there's some real degenerate shit going on.
Yeah.
I'm just, I was like, they have 6 fucking PIs? What the fuck is going on? I'm never gonna get that.
Yeah, these days I filter out for like an enormous amount of buffs, like PIs and all the other stuff that people are going to give more and more each patch now. I'll look at like a minimal buffs on their log. I'll look at like one of the top 10 logs still usually, and hopefully I get like a reasonable fight length. So it's not like a super fast mythic speed kill. So it'd be closer to what my guild would do, like above average, pretty fast, you know. And then as long as they're still one of the top ranking logs, they probably got some good RNG still, but that it means they're going to be a good player. So then I usually go into their casts and look.
I think Tettles' point though, like if there's just a good player you know of from like a good guild, just going and looking at their logs is often a really good idea as well. You could look at like top execution parses by guild and then find people of your spec in those guilds as well. That can sometimes be a way to see stuff, although again, maybe that's the worst player in that guild. So you got to be careful.
How is WoW Analyzer these days? Because I
So-
know WoW Analyzer used to be like insanely good, but I think that there's been some stuff lately where it's like less and less specs are kind of maintained.
You can click through the specs button. So this is wowanalyzer.com, and this is another resource you can use to pick up new specs. Usually you're going to want to do it with your own logs once they already exist. And here's the state of different specs. So you can see at this point most specs have 9.0.5 support or partial support, although some of them are still on 9.0.1, and some of them are not really maintained or not supported. But if your spec is one that is accurate for the patch, you can go and put your logs in there. So let me go get an example of this, for instance.
I think the ones that say maintained by like are like very, very good. Like I know a decent amount of these people are just like class guide writers. Some of this partial support is like I think these would be kind of rough if it's only partial support stuff.
Well, it just means that like it'll call out some things, but it's not like I've used it for some specs that have partial support, and it gives you some useful stuff. No matter what, it's going to be very limited because the way this works is you take your Warcraft logs, link from a night of farm or whatever, a night of boss kills, and then you'd go over to WoW Analyzer and paste it in here, and then you could go look at like a kill of a boss and just pick somebody. You see, I actually don't remember which specs were supported, but let's look at like Athlock maybe.
Not Havoc, Demon Hunter, not Warrior, none of the Warlock specs.
Okay, yeah, and you could look at Windwalker, and it'll give you some, checklist of some stuff. On real-world fights, almost everybody will have, like, downtime. Like, on Stone Legion Generals, right, there's just huge amounts of time where you're not hitting anything. But you can see if there's big disparities between some abilities and others. Particularly, like, if you're really good at a spec on a certain fight, you will often know better than this. But if you're new at something, it can give you some good information about, like, how much value you're getting out of your different effects, and making sure that you're not, doing certain mistakes, making sure that it can check to make sure that you're, flasking, for instance, here, like this guy didn't in my recent Stone Legion Generals kill.
That's so awkward.
Yeah.
Something that is important to note, like for healers, WoW Analyzer is like Omega Abyss for them. Like it's always something that you should be checking out if you are looking to play a healer. For DPS specifically, looking at boss fights such as Stone Legion Generals is kind of bait. More often than not, you would typically like to look at some fights such as Hungering Destroyer, Shriekwing, Sludge Fist, like very much the single target fights with minimal downtime. You don't want to be looking at like fucking Sire Denathrius and Stone Legion and all of those guys that have like big downtime, clumps of AoE. I had to stop DPS for a moment. If you are gonna look at those fights, make sure that you pick a log with like the exact same kill time as your kill time. Those are the only real like ways that you can look at them. But having to hold DPS is like always a bit rough too. Like on Sire Denathrius, I'm pretty sure I'm AFK like half of phase 1.
Yeah, what you can do is you can look at you can put other people's logs into WoW Analyzer that are good, and you can see like which of these things are actually important and which of these is just like everybody on Sire has 60% uptime of these abilities because of the way that the fight works, and which of them is it actually like here, getting every single power infusion cast on the fight seems pretty good, but missing out on all of your penance or schism casts, that may be just a normal thing based on how the fight looks.
I think it is worth mentioning, we brought up like downtime and logs, right? I think it's worth going back once you know the spec, how to do single target, and then seeing how people handle downtime is really good. Like once you are able to hit the boss again, what's the first thing you do? What do you put your dots up? Do you spend your resource? Do you build a resource? Whatever. Throw up cooldowns immediately. The order in which people do that at the higher end is important because they know what's going to be most optimal in that moment.
Yeah, and potentially like if you're a ranged DPS, there's a couple of really important general adages. Always be casting, right? If you're picking up a new caster, that's something that a lot of people do very badly. You're just kind of sitting there, and if you're a melee, you would be autoing, but you're a ranged, you're just sitting there and you're not casting anything. And so just make sure you always have something going on your cast bar. And then also identify what your movement globals are, right? And sometimes you can scuff your rotation by like 2 globals in order to mean that you get to cast something good during your movement, right? Like if you can make it so that you're casting a Star Surge instead of reapplying dots while you're moving, that sort of thing can be valuable. I don't know exactly how much.
That's good. That's correct.
Okay, yeah. Those sorts of things, making sure you have your. If there's a global you can do while moving and there's movement soon, delay it a bit until you're moving. Or do you movement now while you're on your global? Like, if anytime you have a global that lets you move, go and move on that global. Even if you don't have to get there yet, just get some of that movement done while you can.
So for caster specifically, yes, stutter stepping, very big deal. On top of that too, I notice I don't understand what happens, but for some reason people won't spell queue a lot of their spells. Sometimes whenever they're playing a caster, they will give like 1 input per cast. That shit's bad. That shit
spam
is like
your next
really,
button as,
Yeah.
as you're about to be off global, yeah.
I am a fiend. Like you don't have to be specifically like me in this case, but I'm a fiend for like every input is like fucking 6 inputs beforehand, and I'm like literally mashing every single button until I see that cast start, and then I'll start mashing the next ability. And it's like I see too many times people are giving like 1 or 2 inputs per ability, and they'll have like these micro delays in their rotation between like when their last cast finishes and their new cast starts, and that shit will just add up over the course of a fight, and you will miss just a lot of casts. So, like you'll end up missing 20 some odd abilities that you could have otherwise pressed over the course of the whole entire fight, which translates to thousands of DPS at times. And it's just oof, it's really bad if you don't super optimize that part of the game. And that's for every spec. That's not just for ranged specifically. I notice it for ranged more often than not. I don't really know why, but it's very, very important that you don't do that. Ooh, okay.
Yeah,
Also,
I think
another.
it's sorry to interject, but I think it's because casters have that like mentality of I'm casting something, I don't want to interrupt it. Even
Yeah.
though you can't interrupt it with your own keybinds pressing the next spell usually. I think there's that like hesitation there, whereas melee specs are just like me hit the next button coming up, no cast times, slash the boss.
There was also a question about spell queue window in the chat. Making sure that your spell queue window is set correctly is like super important. So there's like a CVAR for this. If you used advanced interface options for it's like it's just I think spell queue window,
Yeah.
all one word. At the default game, you would never notice it's set to 400 ms. You should not have it at 400 ms. That shit is just omega bad. I think this is maybe part of the reason that people had this issue with their casting is because 400 ms in advance of having to press your button is pretty rough for a lot of players. So typically the rule of thumb is like 60 plus your MS, maybe 100 plus your MS, but just throw it at like 100 or 200 and you will instantly notice a difference if you've been playing at 400 for forever.
Yeah, so the if this is too high, it means that you like okay, you're pressing 3. Oh, actually you want to be pressing 2 instead. It's too late. The 3 command is already locked in because it's within that window, right? And so you want it to be roughly around where your ping is plus a little bit of buffer so that you can whatever you're pressing like as your global is coming off is what actually gets sent through instead of what you were pressing a long time ago. But if you have it too short, right, if your spell queue window is 0 ms, that just means that it will not accept a command from you except for like then, so you can't like pre-queue up and have press your 3 button 50 milliseconds before you're off global and have it still cast that. So that will always mean, like here, look at this log. Look at how there's no space between casting each of these fireballs, right? That's what you want to have happen. That's what we want this to look like. If you look at novice players' logs, you will often see little gaps. And that is something that can happen because either your spell queue window is too short or because your window is too long or just because you're new or because you're bad, you are not actually spamming your button and you're having these gaps open up.
You're not hitting the button fast enough to be able to register within the spell queue window of 400, which is fucking long, by the way. So I posted the CVAR. It's like /console and then space spell queue window 100. Like that's just 100 for the spell queue window. I have played it like whenever I was on a West Coast realm and I had a ping of like 70, I played on like 150. Now I'm on Zul'jin and I have a ping of like 20 to 15. I play with like a spell queue window of like 70. You just play around with it. It's something that like you could just go hit a training dummy and you'll instantly notice the difference whenever it's like too long or too short. Again, though, you can also download the add-on advanced interface options and like scroll through all the CVARs. That I find that add-on very useful to fuck around with like a lot of different stuff, but I mean, it's not exactly the most useful thing for most people.
Yeah, so when I was like a year into learning WoW, like 4 years ago, I had messed with my CVAR for this example, the spell queue window, and eventually I just put it exactly where it was to begin with because that's the correct place it was for me. But it was a great learning process, and I would advise people just to change it to see how it works, and then change it back maybe.
Ultimately, check your logs and make sure that you do not have gaps between your casts if you're a caster. That's the main thing you've just got to make sure is not happening, because if you have like a 1/10 of a second gap between these fireballs, you are missing out on like 30 fireballs over the fight or something at that point. That is a big sad moment. So don't do that.
Yeah.
Apparently, Jeeth also made a very good video about spell queue windows. So if you want to learn a little bit more about that, I'm sure that video is slightly more comprehensive than the breakdown that I just gave, but I gave you a little bit of the TLDR.
All right. Do we have any further stuff about learning a new spec here? Going once? Going twice?
Play a lot.
That just about covers it.
Sold
Play a
to the
lot.
patrons. We are moving on to the Patreon section of the show. Thanking our supporters over at patreon.com/Titanforge. They are Paul, U.S. Proudmoore is dead. Long live Paul of U.S. Tichondrius, hero of the Horde. Congratulations.
Pour one out.
Welcome.
Pour one out for the boys.
Rip Paul of US Proud.
Welcome to Tichondrius, the greatest server. Coom Cubine of U.S. Tichondrius. Dratnos, Tettles, and Trell. No Tettles, but in Spanish. McQuack of U.S. Thrall finally has a scale and is thrashing his way to victory. Ooh, nice, nice. Ja, Dratnos' Dino Pillow. Chromed, Trekkie, Never Nude, Chewy. Nasumi, aka no acronym service until Ma 9.1 is announced or introduced.
Yeah, he said that that's his last acronym until
9.1.
Exactly.
Dude, the content drought is hitting all of us. It really is.
Felt that they broke our acronym bot, bro.
Next week, this show is gonna be a Big Wigs Over the Road Racing or Big Rigs Over the Road Racing show. You guys ever played that game?
No.
That is notorious as like the worst game of all time. It's like a racing game, but none of the textures actually collide. There's no collision with any of it, so you just like there's a bridge or whatever, you drive towards it, you just go right under it, and you go through the valley underneath, and then come back up the other side. There's some good videos about it. You should look it up. Big Rigs Over the Road Racing. That'll be our topic next week, though.
Big rigs. I thought the
rigs.
word.
Yeah, I said big wigs
like
the first
big
time.
wigs,
Broken.
like raid alerts.
Yeah, not that. Big rigs. Because it's like
is
truck
this some
racing.
fucking WoW add-on? Like
No,
what?
dude,
I was like,
they should be though. They should make it an add-on, like the Peggle add-on. Do you guys want?
I.
Do you guys want to do Peggle add-on as our next show episode? Actually, that could be a good way to fill the content drought.
What the fuck's a Peggle add-on?
Sure.
You don't have the Peggle add-on? I was playing this so much in the start of the expansion. You know Peggle?
No.
You don't know Peggle? Oh my god.
How do you spell this word?
Peggle. It was this great like little flash game / actual little standalone game, and then they came out with a WoW add-on during like Wrath.
Okay.
And then I was playing it again during the weeks leading up to Shadowlands launch. That was the last content drought. Was right before Shadowlands came out. It's so fun.
What the fuck?
So yeah, those are many topic ideas for next week. It's not AMZ, it's AMZ. Salty Senny, Necris, Tankdill, Nevuk, Sinmora, Eevee, now of US Proudmoore. Oh my god, Eevee ditched by Paul. Just as soon as Eevee showed up on US Proudmoore, Paul was out of there
man.
for US Tichondrius. That's actually so messed up.
That's so fucked up, bro.
Stevenson, love the content an opal bit. Take Light of the Protector and Frenzied Regen off the GCD. No Trick, I scheduled a Tettles Flame. Cutting Edge Sire Dematicus, congratulations. No Tettles. No Tettles. Paint stick figures are the best way to explain raid strats. No Tettles. Nyx. No Tettles. Bruceif. Dratnos Rats or Dis. Don't Go Hollow Gamers. 9.1 soon Copium. M-Sanity. Xena. We Are Praying Hanny will pump wit in 9.1. Rogue is now good enough for Prog, but still bad enough to be sat for SLG. Bless up. Red Color. Some Zero of US Tichondrius. YouTube.com/Workbringer. Morty died 3 times to mechanics this week. Ahara of US Proudmoore also brutally ditched. KOZ's mythic team is trash cans, not trash cans. Gallic, Snicker Shelby, Alphabet Soup, Druid Friends of Evolved Gaming, Roly Poly Boulder Fist, the Laser Chicken, LF 3-Day Cutting Edge Guild in 9.1. That was the person who asked us last week about their guild search, so I'm hoping at some point we will get an update on this name to a happy story at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
I
gonna
hope
be a
there's
good
a good
arc.
resolution.
Yeah. Gonzo XD on Zul'jin, and Titanforge Hot Tub Stream or We Riot. Well, here you are. Here we are in the beautiful Tomb of Sargeras hot tub up here. All right, let's move on to Q&A.
Ah, shit, wait, I put us in the wrong category. We should have been in hot tubs,
Hot
pools,
tubs,
and...
pools, and beaches. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man, I forgot that's a new
Fuck.
category. We could have gotten so many new viewers.
True.
I don't know if we could have, but maybe.
You have a whiteboard in your background, Tuttles. You could write people's names on there. That'd be easy.
I can't write around on their names, though.
You don't have a banana?
I mean, I could. I'm sure Amazon ships anywhere.
All right, our first question comes from Polymorphs on Discord, who asks, do you see any classes jump into the M plus meta now that prides are going away?
I will field this first, and I think Ellie Shaman gets a lot better. Does Ellie Shaman start to break into the point where random casuals are going to be re-rolling to it? Maybe not, but I think the high-end player base is going to start seeing a lot more of Elemental Shaman being played. There's not a lot of NA Ellies, realistically. There's a couple EU ones, but I suspect that more and more people will start playing it. Notably, Yoda, probably going to bust out the Ellie if I had to guess.
Yeah, Ellie does look pretty sweet. It's not like it's bad against prides either. It does have off healing, although the big Ancestral Guidance off healing comes in AoE. It's not that good on single target.
Yeah.
Which is kind of sad. I think that, yeah, the like single target, focus stuff that Pride encourages, the resilience against the Pride damage. I don't know. It's hard to say because I think a lot of the same specs are going to be good in the new environment as well, right? Like Fire Mage is really good against Pride, but Fire Mage is just still going to be really good. I think. I don't think there's too much to worry about there.
I mean, I think it's more just Mage, right? But Mage just brings so much to the group that you can't replace easily.
Frost
Mage
and
looks
Arcane
really
actually
bad
are
in Raid.
both. Yeah, in Raid, in Raid, I think Fire. In Raid, I think you maybe play Frost or Arcane or something. Maybe Frost. I don't know. Yeah. Probably not too many mages in Raid, but I think they'll continue to be a mainstay of Mythic Plus.
So where would the if you did see an Ellie like shift in, would it be over the Moonkin or would it be over the Rog? I think it's over the Rogue, right?
Maybe, yeah.
Moonkin is starting to get worse though.
The Tormented Affix does kind of encourage rogues, right? Like you'd want to skip all the trash at the start to get to your anima powers as early as possible.
That does also check out. Fuck, I don't know.
I believe, yeah, that's true. I think Ellie would maybe replace the Boomkin at least for a good chunk of the season until people get like really fleshed out routes, and then you could bring back some of the slightly more optimal classes that just require a little bit more risky play. If that makes sense.
Yeah,
Like you can play without a rogue and just invis potion. That's the word. Pass everything at the beginning, and then not have to worry about skipping prides anymore. But it's gonna take some time for all that to flesh out.
Do you remember when Hunter was the best class of the game at the beginning of this season, and now it's just...
I think they'll be good as well at the start of next patch, too. I mean, also, they'll have Sylvanas bows for a couple months while everybody else is not hit their power spikes as early.
Mod check any fucking Hunters? Where are the Hunters?
Alcaris in Discord asks, I wonder how viable M plus only rogue will be. Locked into DH for raiding, and I'm not sure how big a deal the raid gems are going to be. So yeah, this is a good question. So the raid gems, the effects of them do work in M+. It's only the set bonuses that only work in raid, right? So there's a couple of implications there. First off, there might be a different good set between raid and M+, because you don't need to go and activate your set bonus in M+. So you might have slightly different optimal Shard of Domination setups.
Yeah, true.
But you need the Shard of the important thing there is that you need the Shard of Domination gems themselves. Those things are fucking wild.
You can get them from like heroic rating though, right? And normal rating, right? You can upgrade them all the way that way, I think, right?
I'm not super fleshed out on the system, but you have to at least have them.
Yeah, I think that you rank them up. It's in a similar way to like the profession quests for Nyalotha, where it's like, oh, collect 10 shards, you get 1 per normal per normal boss, 1 per LFR ring, 10 per heroic boss, 20 per mythic boss or whatever. I think the shard system is sort of similar in terms of upgrading them from rank 1 to rank 5 or whatever. It's like it's going to happen faster for mythic players, but if you just do heroic raid, that should still get you there in a pretty reasonable time. I think.
So you could,
I could be just
but
making
you
stuff up
would,
though.
but you would have to be pugging as Mythic Plus only rogue kind of thing, is what you're saying.
I do think that, yeah, hopping into heroic to get your raid gems. I actually don't know how much slower it'll be on normal or LFR as well. They might have sped that up. But I think that you'll be able to get them all without having to do mythic raiding. But I
And what's the
don't
deal with
know.
What's the deal with sockets next tier?
Yeah, so domination sockets are from raid only. So you will, if you do want your best items at high item level, you will need the domination socket items from Mythic, I think.
Well, it's what I thought. That's the
Which
unfortunate
is
reality of the
that's the
situation
bigger
too.
roadblock into this. Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
the gems are
Oh,
good.
fuck. You're locked in a rating next tier, aren't you? Fuck. I
It-
didn't even realize how bad it was.
Well, yeah, it's what, a 7% DPS gain roughly.
Fucking lot. Yeah.
I mean, that's
probably
like
just
tier
single
sets,
target.
right? Yeah. So this is for all the people that have been advocating for tier sets to come back. This part of it is that kind of huge benefit to rating. Is going
Tier
to be
sets
there, I
are
guess.
sick. And these are fucking domination sockets that are not sick. That's the
Yeah.
problem,
The
man.
problem is that
Tier-
these don't have that upside of changing how your class plays, which is really fun about tier sets.
I'm down with the 7% damage gain from a 4-piece bonus if it's fucking cool. Like if it's domination sockets, I don't care.
This
It's
should
just-
have a lower acquisition barrier though than a 4-piece tier set, right? 4-piece tier sets, like, that's hard
Yeah.
to get your hands on.
That checks out too.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know for sure exactly how all of it's going to work yet, but it does look like that you're probably going to be missing out if you're not rating more than you were last year.
Yeah, it seems that way. Also, not only the damage from the gems are good, but the healing too. Like I use this gem on PTR where it just gives you like a tiny shield every 5 seconds. It did like 10% of my healing in a key. Just one gem.
Were you tanking
So-
that key, or
I was tanking.
then yeah? I mean,
These domination sockets are insane.
that's sick. Last question comes from Zion E on Discord, who asks, question regarding the new M Plus affix. Is it currently possible to get and keep anima powers for different roles if you go out, swap into DPS instead of heal, and then swap back after picking a power? And if so, could this be part of the meta strategy? I have no idea if that's possible. Have you guys tested that?
Yes, it is. It is possible. Still,
Okay.
that has to get fixed. Like, I
Oh my
refuse to. I refuse to believe that they will not fix this.
Because if you're there's one where it's like your self healing is increased by 75%, and that
Yeah,
doesn't
I was
show up
about
for
to say
tank
that.
rolls, right? But if you could swap to like unholy, do the lieutenant, get that power, and then go back out and swap blood and come back in,
Well,
and like you've got 75% increased self healing as a blood death knight.
Oh, that'd be so good.
Oh,
there's also that tank one that does fucking infinite damn.
that's
that
only when you
pulls-
hit auto though, right? So that's not going to be too useful.
Oh,
on,
that is true.
on
Oh yeah,
DPS
actually,
players.
a lot of that's been tuned. That like reflect damage from autos has been knocked down quite a bit already, and a lot of
Okay.
the powers were fixed. Like the infinite spawning mana orbs for healers is like a 4 proc per minute now. I think.
The overflowing
um,
chalice, yeah.
Yeah, maybe we could cover that next week though. There's a lot of tuning going on for those.
Oh, just the power. I mean, the powers are hard to discuss until like we don't even know if they're all implemented yet, and we don't know. There's like a lot that's still unknown about them. As to like, oh, is this all the powers that we're going to be getting? Is it going to be the same every week? Are these guys? Are these fucking guys going to move around the world? Are they going to swap spots with
Yeah.
one another?
We've seen a weekly
there
reset on PTR
maybe
now.
also-
What happened over the weekly reset with regards to the powers and the mobs and stuff? Do you guys know?
I didn't check. I'll be honest with you.
As far as I know, I think they said the same, like powers and lieutenants and positioning at least.
Interesting.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, it can still be like we know that Nihilotha obelisks were AABB, so
That's
it's not unprecedented that stuff may change on an AABB rotation. But yeah,
The old
at least nothing
fortnightly
changed.
rotation to catch those new the kids, get the Zoomers
Yeah.
interested.
Yeah, they thought they were going to Tilted Towers, but really they were going to Tomato Town. It's just a common
Dude, Tomato Town's not there anymore,
misnomer.
man. That's a bad reference. They nuked that. They blew it up. It's gone.
Okay.
Okay. So TLDR answer to this question is yes, it is possible on PTR. Yes, we can imagine ways that it would be good. I think they will fix that if that actually does become meta, but it's possible that it will not get fixed because it's not a meta strategy, and then you'll find some cool way to do it for a week before they do fix it if it becomes popular.
Dude, Can you fucking imagine them trying to like? Okay, so one of the things that you can't do for the Great Push is like you're not really allowed to zone out of the instance. If
Mhm.
the only meta strategy for live is like, oh yeah, you gotta zone out of the instance, and you'll do these keys. They would probably, if I had to guess, like they'd probably fix it just for that, more than anything else. Just like, no more
Yeah.
fucking zoning out of these dumbass
Well,
powers,
I mean,
man.
I think that they would just fix it if it became a popular and dumb strategy. I think they
It
usually
is a
fix dumb popular strategies, except for Cardboard Assassin, which took them. I mean, it only took him one patch cycle to fix it. It was just unfortunate that it's the longest patch cycle in recorded history.
I mean, it's
Yeah,
also just
it's a 50.
it is a dumb fucking strategy to
Yeah.
zone out to like spec different powers and shit.
Zone out strats in M plus have been a thing before, though. That's been there's been stuff you zone out for.
Change your gear after they change that. Yeah, very
Yeah,
cool.
yeah,
Change talents,
Yeah.
change gear, change specs sometimes.
yeah.
Well, that's an active. I feel like that's not that egregious because that's like an active decision. But
Hmm. And it's rare.
I thought that was
rare
actually
that's
pretty
like,
cool.
uh-huh.
I did like a high Black or Cold in Legion a couple times, and our Boomy player went feral for like the first and the last two bosses, and then was Boomy for the entire middle of the dungeon. I thought that was really cool.
Oh yeah, because if you were melee during the middle bit of that dungeon, you were entirely useless.
Yeah.
Because those archers would just kill you if you got within 35 yards of them. That was such a cool mechanic.
the real zone out tech was the fucking see the triumvirate like zone out with the 45-second RP before the final boss, and then get lock summoned back. That was epic.
Oh, I always
Yeah.
had an earlier zone out strategy in Seed of the Triumvirate that involved zoning out and not coming back.
Well, most of
Oh
the time I
yeah,
did that
right
one
after
too.
the first pull, everyone dies to the first monster pull, and you just leave the instant.
Oh, you guys died to the first monster pull? That one wasn't that bad. The fucking trash in front of the third boss was actually just like bannable. It was so bad. I don't. Okay, don't even get me started. That shit was bad. That was the worst dungeon I've ever seen.
Well, you never know. We might talk about Seed of the Triumvirate next week because there's nothing newer to discuss. So we'll be back then. Who knows what content there will be? Maybe we'll have a patch date by then. But that is the plan. Thanks everybody for hanging out. We'll see you then.